Welcome to Impact the World, the show for and about creatives, changemakers, and entrepreneurs. This is a conversation episode where a special guest shares with me what they are creating and the behind-the-scenes journey of their experience. Welcome to Impact the World. My guest on this show is Lucy Wallace. Lucy's an old friend and she's doing some really amazing things in the world. She has a master's degree in Transpersonal Psychology, specializing in the trauma that manifests itself in the body. But she has been a dance instructor for many years, and I was there when in 2015 a light bulb went off for Lucy around taking and using her work and really putting the power of her mission into her work. Her mission being to improve the lives of incarcerated women through the healing power of dance. So she has been not only taking dance classes into many prisons across the US, but she has also been training prisoners to lead classes for other prisoners. We did this interview during Corona lockdown. So Lucy was at home in Boulder, Colorado, and she explained to me before we started that she had been teaching on Zoom in some of the prisons. But what we talk about in this conversation is how she got started, how she figured out how to do a nonprofit with no background with nonprofits. Lucy and I also touched on a topic that has been dear and close to our hearts for many years, which is race, systemic racism, and what can we possibly do about it. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Lucy, and for any of you who are feeling like you need to be inspired into action, Lucy is a great example of somebody who didn't know exactly what she was getting herself into, and yet her work and her mission has grown really steadily over the last 5 years. Enjoy. Lucy, thank you so much for being with us. You know, as I explained in my introduction, we've been friends for kind of 8 years now. And one of the most exciting things for me in getting to interview you today is I was there at the beginning of you embarking on this journey, and I got to witness the joy in your eyes. I remember the first time you came back from a prison for your first time teaching, you were the embodiment of someone on fire and you were activated. And I remember it moved through you for many, many months. Like it actually changed the whole course of your life. And I could see you going through that struggle of, well, actually, I don't want to just be a dance teacher anymore, kind of in the regular class. It was really fascinating. And then to see what you've done is amazing. So perhaps for people who've never heard of Dance to Be Free before or are new to you and your work, how could you describe what it is that you do to a new person?
So essentially, I go into women's prisons and I teach them how to teach each other. And so it's a real, the program is about empowering the women who maybe never had the chance to feel leadership. But to give you just a little background of how it sparked when you were there, you know, with me in Boulder, it was just a casual conversation. The idea came to make my dance studio into a nonprofit, and then that spilled out into another moment. It really feels like an auspicious moment in time where the idea to make my studio into a nonprofit, another friend came in and said, what if you took what you do to women in prison? And it was, I like to point out that I'm a pretty neurotic, self-doubting person in some arenas where I'll think, what if, or no, that won't work, or, all the kind of fearful thoughts that can happen when we have creativity. I was just like, oh my God, there was no reason not to. There was no, really, and I still think about that. Why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't one dance in prison? And so the courage, though, to go in is another story. And I feel like because of my psychology background, I studied trauma through the body. And so we didn't have theoretical, intellectual lectures. It was really about trauma is in the tissues, it's in our posture, it's in our brain, our reptilian brain. It's fight, flight, or freeze responses that can't be like processed through the mind. And so when I thought, I just knew instinctively this is a traumatized population and movement is key. And so I didn't say that when I presented the idea to the captain that I finally got a hold of in Denver. I just said, can I come and dance at your facility? And he said yes. And to this day, I've been in 16 prisons. I've never had someone say no, a warden or a captain. And so I went in and I was so scared. I think back to, oh, wow, there was just something pushing. It was like, this must happen. This is maybe predestined or something. It was such a feeling of simplicity. And I can't say I knew right away that we would do the teacher trainings. We just went into dance every week. And then we thought, why don't we teach them how to teach each other? And then that went to a whole nother level of really deep, more spiritual, more emotional time with them, because I would be in a circle with 5 women and I got to hear their stories. We did journaling, we did poetry, opening circles, closing circles. And sorry, I just want to say, can you hear that beeping? Is it really obnoxious outside?
Not at all. It's just a sign that you're saying the right thing if the siren goes off or an alarm.
There's a stucco machinery. Anyway,
Well,
so
thank God, we all need some stucco in our life. But actually, Lucy, I'm realizing, probably because I have knowledge of what you do, but perhaps for someone tuning in, what is it to teach a dance class in prison? So perhaps you could start with that first class you taught. Like, what did that look like? What is your type of dance in prison?
So I like to joke that it's like emotional Beyonce choreography.
Which, having taken your classes in Boulder, it's true. It is emotional Beyonce choreography. It's very emotional. It's very fun, and it's a bit sexy. And you're a fireball at the front.
Oh, I forgot when you came to my class. That was pure magic. So it is choreographed, so not a lot of free dance. It's about 12 songs without stopping in a row. It builds in an arc of kind of slow. I use all types of music, Lord, Eminem, Madonna, Beyonce. So usually pop, usually recognizable. And then it gets really high energy. And that's where you want to kind of get people out of their minds and into just pure experience. And then it comes down into a cool down and stretch. And so it's an hour. And I walked in July 1st, 2015, wearing very loose clothing and sneakers. And, I kind of just took it down a notch. And then I walked into this huge gym with, sports logos and bright lights, and they had a booming sound system. And to warm the crowd up, I always laugh that I played Depeche Mode. Just random, 80s music in
Great.
prison. And this girl was so cool, Michelle, who ended up being one of our strongest teachers. She's like, that's my jam.
That's great.
Warming up the crowd. I only had about 8 women and 2 friends with me. So I never go in alone. And I just danced with the women behind me and I led, the choreography. And that very first moment I started to move. So the first song I chose was Lord, and it's called 400 Lux or something. And she actually says, I want to kill it with you repeatedly. So it wasn't like the best choice of song, but I but I just went like this to the right. And this heavier kind of Samoan looking woman who was there for a life sentence said under her breath, but I heard it. She said, oh, this is spiritual. And I was like, oh my God, she gets it. She gets it without me having to say a word, that what we're doing is way deeper than exercise. It's not about calorie burning. It's not about getting it right. It's really about having these women feel safe in their body because they were most likely violated beaten, raped, all of it. And so when you're traumatized, you're not in control of your body, but when you're dancing, you're in control. And that is so healing. And so we finished up the class. The sergeant said she loved it. And then we just kept going back every week. So that's that very first experience. 6 months later, we did the teacher training, and that's where it went to that whole deeper level.
I remember one of the first things there were a group of us, it was a party that we were at in Boulder, and there were a few of us, and you were explaining to us like how you were experiencing this. And I remember it was like watching someone having a very powerful spiritual awakening through the form of their purpose. Because for you, you'd studied spirituality, you'd gone to various things over the years, but this was different. It's like you had become activated and you were on fire. And you also, I remember, and you were very honest about this, it's like you didn't quite know who you were for a while because this new thing had come along that had upended the way you felt about so many other aspects of your life. But I always remember you spelling it out to us. You said, if I had just been stopped by the wrong person at the wrong time, I could be in prison like a lot of these women are. Like, you were basically pointing out to us that, sure, yeah, there were some big people in there for big crimes, but also people who perhaps lived in the wrong neighborhood, had the wrong color skin, quite minor things they had done that had landed them in prison for years. And that always stayed with me. I remember that was a real teaching moment that you were giving so many of us who perhaps weren't so privy to that.
Oh, completely. I mean, that's what Obama said. I think when he went to visit a prison in maybe Oklahoma, there but for the grace go I, that expression or something like that, where that is such a big difference. When staff can say that to me, even, captains and sergeants can say that, like, I could be here. That's the ultimate humility, because really, how many of us can relate to that? Yeah. I mean, I think the simplest one is, I've met women who killed people drunk driving. I mean, how many of us have been stupid in that regard, or completely about the color of our skin is a big, huge reality there. And so,
and have you seen 13, Ava DuVernay's documentary? Is it 13 or 13th? I can't remember 13th. And it's unbelievable. Like, I think it was a couple of years ago I saw that. It lays it all out so well. That's the kind of information we need if we aren't privy to that stuff.
Right. It's basically legalized slavery.
Yes.
Is what we're seeing.
Yeah.
And especially in the South.
Right. And you've been doing a lot of work in the South.
Yeah. The first one I visited was Arkansas, and I pulled up to the prison, and there was guards on horses with Black men with, like fabric on their head, and they were in sort of a ditch. And I was like, what year are we in? And in the South, they live in barracks. So it's like a big warehouse with cots and lights on 24/7. And this is all over the South. So I'm not just like making any particular state look bad, but it was lights on 24/7, exposed toilets, exposed shower heads, barracks. You have your bed and maybe like a little something for storage, never alone. And now with COVID, they have no programming. They're in there 22 hours a day.
Oh, God.
And then I believe that's happening in a couple of the states we've been in the South, is that barracks style and that kind of schedule. And so it's a recipe for, I think, mental illness to live in that kind of environment. But we went into Arkansas, we had a great group, and then we expanded to the Maximum facility. So I've mainly been in Maximum, and they're all so different. Each facility, each state is fascinatingly different. From Hawaii to Florida, I have seen like massive differences around security. In one prison, I can just drive in. I don't even get out of my car. Another, I have to take off my shoes. I can't wear certain colors. It can be so strict and then be so loose. In some prisons, I'm alone. I'm literally by myself with my volunteers with no staff. What?
Uh,
But as it goes on, I feel like everything becomes more and more surreal, and it's like and there's such a magic to it that I thought, oh my God, I'm so lucky. I'm surrounded by some protection. But then I think, is that my privilege?
mhm,
Like that just hit me,
mhm.
a few weeks ago, like, oh, maybe I just feel this safety because I'm just looking at what I represent now as a blonde white woman when I
Yeah,
go in
I
to
get
the
it.
South. Like that's
Hmm.
um
Yep. Stuff that we don't, as white people, as you know, Stephen, my husband's African American, my friends who are of color, it's like they have a reality that I've never had to think about. So yeah.
truly, like if I could just tell a little quick story. I went
Please.
to the Civil Rights Museum in Mississippi last time. The last training I did was in Mississippi before COVID. And I brought a Black woman who's now an employee of mine. Her name's Demetrius. I met her in prison in Nebraska. Um, she got out and now she's co-teaching.
Hmm.
She's,
Nice.
she's amazing. So she said, I want to go to the Civil Rights Museum. And so I went with her and a sister from another mister named Lily Wallace. Random. The three of us go in. Lily and I are white. Everyone in the museum is Black. All these little kids were there who were just these beautiful, like 5-year-old Black children singing This Little Light of Mine, I Want to Let It Shine. And then the museum was an arc where you walk around the timeline of slavery, through Jim Crow till now. And then there was a black box theater about Medgar Evers, who was an activist. I never heard of him until I saw the airport was named after him. I'm like, why don't I know this man? He was like as impactful as Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And it was a black box theater where you got to see on a little screen the story of his life and how he was assassinated. And I was sitting in there with all these Black women and then one white woman. And then the rifle that killed him was in a plexiglass box lit up. And then the part in the movie that came to him being shot, you heard the super loud, rifle. And I didn't even quiver. I just sat there. And then every Black woman was like, and it was so, it was so disturbing. It's like I have felt safe in my body my entire life, mostly. I mean, as a woman, of course, I have fear sometimes,
Yeah.
but that was so impacting to me of like the nervous system. Oh, I just, so I
Yeah.
think ultimately what Dance to Be Free in my goal is to help women feel safe in their body. And so we don't need to dig up their past. We don't need to talk about their trauma. The movement solves it all. And then we do it together. We're not doing it in isolation, we're in community. And then the writing and the poetry integrates it. And then they share, if they want, what they've written. And just the insights pour out, wisdom pours out because they're just such wise souls. And they're so strong. They're such
Mm.
warriors. I mean, to hear their stories, it's like, oh, I was raped at 3. Yeah. It's confounding. Like my brain often doesn't even know how to take it in. And so there's probably some level of shutting down sometimes because it is too much.
Yeah.
Um, but it's so profound. I couldn't think of a deeper avenue for healing. Like it's so clean and simple. We don't have to re-traumatize. Like talking about it can be re-traumatizing.
It's interesting. I mean, this is a bit of a sidebar, but I did a lot of ecstatic dance, or five rhythms, it's sometimes known as, throughout my 20s and some parts of my 30s. And I always was struck how we do this 2-hour dance session together. And it would be super shamanic. And, all of us in there let go of so much. And then at the end, it was always a shame because they would invite people to speak. And we'd sit down in a circle, and sometimes what was said was great and would enhance or add to what we'd just done. And then understandably, sometimes certain people would go into their mind and they would start to, because of what had come up, start to try and process it through their mind, or
Mm,
tell a very heavy story that unfortunately now couldn't be moved because the dance was over. So I always thought that was like, I really noticed that. And I also tried to remind myself of that too. It's like, if you just move, the mind can't sit there and go round and round and round and kind of hold it in.
right.
But I have something to ask you. I remember you explaining the level of trust that the women who came to your classes had to have, not just to walk into that room and be with you, but also how they were going to get reacted to by the women who'd chosen not to come, who'd stayed out. Like,
Yep.
I remember you telling me a bit about that. And that, of course, was something I hadn't really considered. But yeah, if you're one of the 8 that walk into your class, how do the other prisoners treat you when you come back out into this fairly tribal ground that they're living in?
Yeah. Yeah. Some would be teased. Um, or we once were dancing out in a courtyard of a prison, and there were women laughing at us on the, you know, sidelines. And I just said, come on over here.
And did any of them?
I got so angry. I was just
Yeah.
like, I get it. It's fear of vulnerability. And what astonishes me is when women come to a teacher training and there's maybe 25. I assumed for years they all knew each other. I was like, oh, they must know each other. And they don't. And then they may be in completely different units. They've maybe seen each other in the yard, but they could be enemies. Um, and then they share so vulnerably. Like, that blows my mind.
Mm.
And I mean, I really try to weave in humor almost right away, because that
Which you're very good at, my friend. It's one of the things that you're known for. And by the way, for anyone watching who would like to experience one of Lucy's classes, you have taken them online now, which is amazing. So you can check her out there at dancetobefree.org. And I highly recommend following Lucy as a teacher, because if, like me, you're like, well, I don't really do choreography, doesn't matter. Just take Lucy's class, you'll have a blast.
yeah, I'm zooming every Saturday free, 10 a.m. Mountain Time. But yeah, it's like the mind is, stuck in taking ourselves so seriously, or being cool, or being defended. But when I'll do anything from face dancing to finger waving to, I have them say things on repeat, like, I know you lying, and then they say it to music, and then they make moves while they say these silly things like, we ready, like any phrase to just break again the
Yeah.
trance of me, and I need to look good, and I need to be cool. And so once there's laughter and um, playfulness, and then I play a video, a montage that I've made of babies dancing, of animals, of elders who just don't give two F's. And that
Mm.
the freedom is even more in prison. I honestly see more liberation in prison than I do out here. And
Yeah.
I think, wow, there's like a volley when I'm teaching. They'll just be like, hey, and then I come back to Boulder and it's like, and we all look at, we got our outfits, and
Yeah. The,
so
the 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 Lululemon outfit can do all the expression for me, right? Yeah. What do you think? I mean, I'm guessing it's just there is a hunger to express. Is that what you put it down to when you go into the prisons?
yeah, yeah, and then they're walking in a straight line. They live in a box.
Mm.
They're told what to do. Everything's a rule. Everything is a regulation. And then I come in to say, wave your freak flag, get it wrong,
Mm.
show wrong who's boss. And then I'm just constantly saying, let go, let go. And so I think then drops the performative aspect of like, oh, I'm dancing to be sexual, or um, to actually feel free. And one woman said it so beautifully: when you have all of your freedoms taken from you, the only thing left to liberate is your body.
Hmm.
and she was in prison for 3 years, wrongfully convicted, and then she met me in 2015, and she for the first time said she could dance without being an object. And
Mm.
so there is sometimes like an impulse when we do a little free dancing exercise that the girls will go to twerking, and I try to name that as just like, notice if that's the go-to of your body as an object. And some of them maybe were pole dancers, and so there's just some of that, and I get it, but I don't even sometimes know the impact. If it's a really big group, someone might be crying all the way in the back, and they're having revelations that just so naturally happen.
Yeah.
And so it is definitely expression. It's freedom. It's freedom in a place that you would never imagine. And so the juxtaposition is so existential sometimes. I mean, I've even been asked to bring it to death row, and I think, oh my God, I can't even imagine. There's a prison I went to where a woman was in solitary for 15 years because she didn't want to leave. And so that's a whole nother.
Yeah.
So I was taken to her cell where she's been for 15 years. And the warden wanted me to bring it there. And I thought, what a cool warden, first of all.
Mm.
So the directions this could go is boundless. That's, I would take it wherever it's asked, Yeah.
Well, and you said that you've been teacher training. So what does that mean? Are you training the teachers in a way, like, are they then given like a weekly slot where one of these so that they can regularly be in the prison even if you're not there?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So they, at this point, like in Nebraska, where I've gone so many times, they're so far along. They choreograph on their own. They teach on their own. They're so talented. And then a prison like Pueblo also has women that are twice a week teaching. They rotate. They have like a whole system. They go up in front. They'll have 75 women in the gym.
Amazing.
I went down there once just to witness that, and I was like, oh my God. Like, would I ever have guessed 5 years ago? And this woman, I'll never forget, she came up to me. She's like, I just want you to know my enemy comes to this class every Friday night, and I just go on the other side of the gym and I dance. I'm like,
So good.
I
So
know,
good.
it's a wordless journey. I'm like, what do you say to that? Or when that woman said, my mom's on death row, would you bring it to her? I'm like, I don't even know where to put it. Like,
Yeah.
reference points, you know what I mean? I feel like I'm in the wilderness or something. Like, there's plenty of arts programs in prisons for sure doing beautiful work.
Mm.
But I don't know of many that go around the country in this way and then have the prisoner sustaining it. And so there's just times where I'm like my mind is just so stretched. But yeah, that's the goal, is that the women hold the program. So
Amazing.
we can keep growing to other prisons.
Amazing. And so, Lucy, when I first knew you, it was 2012, and you had your dance studio in Boulder, and that alone was like a job, like to kind of, to have a commercial building and get enough people there to like cover the rent and cover the, I mean, that alone was its own thing.
Yeah.
When you started to walk towards dance to be free, what have some of the steepest learning curves been for you around being at the head of, because I know you don't do this alone, I know you have amazing support, but being at the head of the group who are making this nonprofit happen? What have been some of the steepest learning curves just with holding that and making it happen in the world?
Like, do you mean managing a nonprofit?
I guess managing the nonprofit and all that's gone with it in this circumstance. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely, it's been challenging. The easiest part is being in prison, I always joke like it's easier to dance with, and there's not a lot of women who've committed murder, honestly, in prison. But I make the joke of like it's easier to dance with murderers than it was to run that studio.
Mm-hmm.
It was also hard because I'm in a very privileged town, and so it was hard to feel the inspiration, but to manage the nonprofit has been it's been hard, it's been tricky, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I do like to point that out. I didn't let that stop me of like I don't know how to have a board of directors. I don't know how to fundraise. I don't know how to budget in my life. I don't know how to. I don't really do structure and like even the word strategy. I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I'm so emotional. I'm impulsive. I'm a little wild, and so having a board and having a budget and having a five-year strategy. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
How would we have ever known 5 years ago, even a year ago? And then we have COVID. It's like I understand there's a place for structure and we need it. It's just funny how it's definitely not my gig, but it's been a little hard to handle. I think I'm conflict avoidant, and so that's been really exhausting in terms of having a board and my
And
co.
how has that gone? Because and the reason I'm pausing you there is I think a lot of the people that will watch this or listen to this because perhaps they know my work, you know, tends to be more empathic, sensitive people. I don't like conflict. And so I've got better. I've understood the importance of standing in and for it. But it took me many years with working with team members or working in partnership with other people, collaborating to learn that if you're conflict avoidant, conflict's going to find you. You know, it's like if you aren't willing to have that difficult conversation, there's going to be a really bad smell in the house for a year. And so it's kind of like, you know, can you deal with the bad smell the first day or week or at the worst case month that you notice it's there? Um, would you say you've come a ways with that now, 5 years later?
It's it's been very hard. I've had to part ways with several people involved, and that's been really painful. Um,
Yes.
one of them was my codependent relationship that I brought into the nonprofit, my romantic codependent
Yeah.
relationship that was really hard in terms of how did I draw boundaries and conflict avoid with my board was getting nervous about his involvement, and I was just like in the middle trying to be peacemaker. And then that eventually ended, and then I then hired someone else that I thought was going to be a huge asset, and that didn't work out. But I would say I called it quicker as soon as I felt some I felt just disrespected, and so I named it, and I think that only went on about 2 months, maybe three.
That's good.
But
No, but here's what you're framing, which is a truth I think many of us relate to. It's like, you know, it's like if you have a really, really bad relationship and it's really hard to get out of and it takes everything from you, you might repeat some of that pattern, but it will never be as bad the next time. You know, they might be a bit nicer in certain ways, but still have some. So I do think we're constantly, we experientially learn how to upgrade because our body tells us when we're back in that kind of same energy. And the body raises an alarm because it has a past experience where it goes, oh, hang on a second. Last time we let this go on for too long, we ended up down there. So I think that's the way for most of us.
yeah, because the romantic one took 6 years, and like, yeah, I will never ever let something like that drag on. And I've been actually feeling so good being alone in terms of my purpose and feeling like um, those past dynamics were pulling me from my purpose and pulling me from my passion. And so it's been really good to just be like, I am solo, full on. I mean, I quarantined single,
Right.
you
Right.
know, in 400 square feet. I was like, if I can do this,
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of being alone anymore.
How many weeks were you quarantined in the apartment?
I would say fully alone for maybe 3 weeks. And then I had a quarantine buddy who works for me, works for Dance to Be Free, my assistant. She's just awesome. And so we kind of spent a lot of time. And then I was thinking, oh, I probably shouldn't be seeing anyone. But it was really powerful to do that alone. And it wasn't bad, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And it
What
was
has it changed for you around Dance to Be Free? I mean, I know we're still in a lot of the quarantine circumstance, so I'm aware that, prisons are going to take time, certain prisons to let you back in, but I'm wondering, because I'm seeing a lot of people have a new sense of purpose or a new idea or a shift has happened through this. What has shifted for you around the work that you're doing in the world and your why?
well, a big shift has been since George Floyd and that horrific
Yeah.
event. And then I have been peeling back the onion. And I think what's alarming me is that when I started Dance to Be Free, I wanted to stay out of the race conversation because I thought it's about trauma. And I honestly, where I was going in Colorado and Nebraska was primarily white. The prisoners were majority white. And so I was just like, I'm not really seeing the race issue here. And then I had a really good friend of mine who does a lot of white awareness work, trying to point things out over the years. And I could just feel myself like, I don't know. And I think if I was in my own denial, I think instead of saying white privilege, it helps to say white denial or white silence or white cowardice. But it just was interesting to see how I wouldn't fully let in the race conversation. And then as I go into the South, it's so different. And the last time I went into Mississippi, there was Demetrius with me, who's Black, and then a bunch of Black women were in the training, and they came up to Demetrius one day and said, if a white woman makes a complaint about a Black woman, there's no questions asked. You get written up or you're thrown in solitary. And they were telling Demetrius, not me. And I was just standing there kind of listening and thought, oh, that's so sad. Like I've been there 3 or 4 times and they hadn't told me. And I wondered if I am just unconsciously not even safe deep down. I represent a lot. I mean, I am as pale as they get. I mean, blue eyes, the whole thing. And I feel super welcomed and loved, honestly. Um, but the women even call me Miss Lucy. And it's like, whoo, okay. And so just the remnants of slavery that are in that area of the country, and a place like Mississippi holds so much trauma. There were the most lynchings in that state than any other state. And I just was watching Mississippi Burning, which is such a tragic movie. I recommend watching. You know, this little girl, Ruby Bridge, was trying to go to school when she was maybe 6, and these white people were screaming at her. They had a government agent had to escort her to school every day, and a white woman on the side was screaming, and she held up a coffin with a Black doll in the coffin to terrorize this little girl who's trying to learn. And then just being in that civil rights museum, there's just so much that I want to do down there. And I think I want to get Kelsey involved, and she's so brilliant, and she's doing a ton around oppression and the body, and white supremacy in the body. So I'm hoping to collaborate with her, because I think I've been blind to maybe my unquestioned even authority or power that I have just walking in. And then I think about the book, My Grandmother's Hands, which I really recommend. And it's about racialized trauma in the black body, the white body, and the blue body, meaning police, law enforcement. And he's saying, Resma Manikim is his name. He said that what white people have done to black people was done to us as European descendants. We're actually just transferring the trauma on. And what he said, which was like, ugh, was, what does the white body have to do to remain silent to such horrific brutality? And I think, what spiritually, almost had to die in us to, I mean, I just saw a photograph from, I think the early 1900s of a black man hanging from a tree while white people just stood there with, their hands on their hips like they were talking about the weather. And there were two little white girls. And I'm thinking, what is happening in the white psyche and body to just think that's even in the realm of, so I feel like I have so much learning to do. And just a quick story, my family's from Virginia, and there's a memoir from it's a really interesting, can you see that?
The Children of Bladen's Field.
So this, my family bought this plantation in the 1840s, but this actual plantation was built in 1690. I think there were slaves there when they got this property. And then I went down there in the 80s. So when I was, I don't know, 10 years old, and I was playing with this dollhouse, and it was so big. It was, huge. It was so memorable, like big dolls and big rocking chairs. And I was just like, always remembered that dollhouse. And when I looked through this memoir recently, I saw that dollhouse and it said slave built dollhouse. And I thought, I was playing with slave toys. Like, what in my, and the haze, again, of like, whoa. And it was my ex-boyfriend who asked my mom over Christmas one time, did you have slaves in your ancestry? And I'm like, why did it take him? Maybe that's why we were together, so he could. And my mom just said, yeah, it was just kind of matter of fact. And, but that kind of, I just have some unraveling to do. I think Dance to Be Free, my purpose feels a little bit shifting to the deep South, and that's primarily where we are. But I feel like I want to really hunker down there because it's like I'm realizing Black people have literally never had a shot at thriving ever in our history, and when I see people say it's about behavior, not color, I just think we don't know our history. And the more I unravel around the predatory mortgage loaning they would do, and we created the ghetto. I mean, it just which leads to mass incarceration. And then it's just like, why can't they pull themselves up by their bootstraps? And then the system never reflects on the whiteness of the whole madness. And it's always on objectifying why they do this and why. And so it's on us. It's on us to do the work. And so it feels like a shift to devote, more into like Alabama, Georgia, and go back to Mississippi more, and Arkansas. Arkansas is literally just, I think they're struggling. They're the ones I heard are 22 hours in the barracks, no movement. Oh. So I've even thought like psychically about, maybe I should have a session with you. like, is there some major karma is just kind of what I wonder.
Well, I think it was interesting when you share like the history in your family. It's no great surprise that from what I know of you and your family, you came, and I'm sure many people watching and listening will relate to this, you came into your family as a bit of a disruptor. Right? And you came in as the one to slightly challenge it, well, more than slightly, sometimes challenge the status quo, do the unexpected thing. And so interestingly, you've now channeled that disruptive energy into being a disruptive force for good.
Mhm.
But what I also got from what you were saying, and Lucy, you hearing what you would say to me years ago about what you were experiencing in prisons was educational for me. And you were bringing me closer to, especially because I didn't grow up in this country. I've only been here 8 years. It's different here. Racism is in the UK, but it's different here. It's definitely, there's something very deep in the lineage because of slavery that I'm still learning to understand. But something I was reading Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility book about 3 months ago, and she lays out the defensiveness that we as white people can have when we are invited to see where we are racist. And I saw this book in Canada. We were doing some workshops there, and I saw it in a bookshop, and I thought, I have to get that. I have to read that. And this was before any of these new racial murders were happening. And before this, the book went like to #1 on Amazon. But what was so good about it for me was it was textbook watching people's reactions on social media, watching how people wanted to fight, seeing people not understanding why saying all lives matter is not okay. And I have someone in my life who is a very sweet person, but she expressed how sad she felt for Black people right now, and that was all she said. And I just challenged her, and I said, our sadness isn't what they need. I said, that's no good. That doesn't serve anybody. I said, we should be everything from angry to what can we do to change this. I said, we should go through all the emotions, but if we're just sad, we're passively watching a group of people who it's like, oh, it's a shame that they always get a hard go of it, isn't it? Rather than going, oh, hang on a second, we're all here together, and this system is a mess. And like I said to you, Lucy, having channeled for so many years, I've always known that this time was going to be rough. That the system, the guides who I channel for years have said, oh yeah, your systems are going to go through a complete overhaul, and it's going to be messy, and it's going to be uncomfortable. So as hard as this time is, and there are days when, like anybody, I feel I can have defeat about things, or you feel I can't take anymore. Then something shifts, and you go, okay, and now I'm seeing someone being part of the solution, and now I'm seeing a way to be part of the solution, and it's a tiny bit of progress. And I think we have to be heartened by that in times like these. Otherwise we lose our hearts, and if we lose our hearts, that's when defeat kicks in. So I think what you're doing, is there some karma? But I think there is for all of us. I think for all of us right now, we're at this time on the planet where the shadow of humanity is coming up in all different ways, and we're having to reckon with it.
Yeah, and it's such a good example of that comment. I feel sad. It's like, again, it's putting it on Black bodies instead.
Exactly.
I feel sad for us that we are so sick that we've done this for this many years or ignored it. In my case, I mean, the simplest thing I got from Robin DiAngelo was, I've lived in segregation my whole life. That thought just hit me, or I didn't consider white as a race. I thought race was there, and I didn't learn anything in grad school about my own racism. It was a multiculturalism class that could not have been more dull. And if I think Robin DiAngelo has been doing this work for so long, I know she just wrote that book in 2018 and I finished grad school, but like how much more vitalizing that would have been to say, we are in a trance that is so thick that even as liberal, white, educated people, there's such defensive-ness.
Yeah.
And I've seen it in friends, and I've been so disappointed, and it scared me because I thought, love and light talk, or I just want to focus on love and light. I'm like, because you can. I mean, like Black bodies are on the front lines every day, and I got a little hopeless when I saw educated friends be so clueless. And so I have been feeling like a disruptor with my family on Facebook, cousins, aunts that would say things I would never reply to or comment on. And now I'm saying no more. I'm not going to just ignore your completely oblivious share where, I don't know, you're quoting Morgan Freeman. That's the big thing.
Sorry.
Anyway, I'm
Sorry,
going.
you're completely oblivious share where you're quoting Morgan Freeman.
Well, there's the right wingers will send me videos like Morgan Freeman saying racism isn't a problem, or the Black elite are not always helpful to the cause.
Right.
Rappers and actors, Morgan Freeman said, just stop talking about race and it will go away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, I just, oof. Skin folk don't mean kin folk.
Right. And I think anything that's used defensively, whatever context it was originally given in, because who knows when he said that or what wider context that one sentence he was using. I don't know because I haven't seen the whole thing. But yeah, anything that's used defensively. But it's, I'm reminded of something that a relative of Stephen's shared with me, that she was one of the first Black kids to go into the first segregated school. And it was literally, there were 4 or 5 of them that were allowed into what had previously been a white only school. So this is back in, I think, the 60s, I'm guessing this was. And she shared how they begged and pleaded their parents not to be sent there. But their parents were adamant they needed to go because this was really important for the cause and because they'd fought hard to get this. And they said it was hell. They said their lives were hell, like they were bullied horribly by pretty much all the other white students there. And so, when I heard that story a few years ago, it was just yet another puzzle piece for me to try and piece this together. Yeah, in the limited understanding I had. But yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted right now. But at the same time, I don't think. I think if us being uncomfortable and having to learn some stuff is the hardest part of racism that we're having to deal with, versus, like you said, the bodies that have been on the front line, it's nothing. And so I celebrate you being a disruptor. And I think you're a disruptor, but like any of us, even if we are disruptors on the planet, we're also disrupted. Like life is disrupting us, learning is disrupting us, the whole thing is, one moment you're a teacher, the next moment you're a student, and that's just the role that we all play as human beings.
Yeah, it's such an intense time. I'm in my bubble of Boulder, and I've thought about leaving because it's just there's no people of color in my life, and it's my loss. I'm missing out on so much, and so sometimes I think about leaving, and I do get a little hopeless. There are times where I'm like, this is actually really dark. Like I just saw 5 people were lynched, and I'm thinking,
Mm-hmm.
this is it's so scary how hate can go so deep. And I'd like to think it's on the fringe. And seeing all these protesters filling up the streets all over the world was so encouraging.
Yeah.
But the just how it feels like a trance, and I just use that word because it's like, how have I been asleep? How have we all been asleep? And it's harming all of us. It's harming white people to be indoctrinated. I think we've been fed some weird system that is so damaging to the entire planet. I think it's at the core of every issue. So when people say, what about the environment or what about immigration? I'm like, this is the core of planetary racism. It's been in our ancestors took over the world.
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. It's English. I always say I have the oppressor and the oppressed. I've got Scotland and
Hmm. Yeah, and like when I look at England's history, having been born in England in this life anyway, I'm blown away when you look at this teeny tiny little island that had the arrogance to like go around like how what anyway. I mean it is it but where I always land, even if I have a bad day or a bad few days, or it feels heavy and the darkness feels overwhelming, where I always land is this is the make or break time in human race history. It's like the Earth's still going to be here, the universe is still going to be here, but this is the make or break time for the human race. And so, yeah, a lot of this ugliness has to come up and out. And even though you say you're in your Boulder bubble, which I get it because I lived in the Boulder bubble for a few years and it held me really well. But like you, I was traveling off a lot. You're going into the heart of the opposite of that bubble and coming back and reporting and moving the energy. So wherever you end up landing, I have no doubt that you will be somebody who is bridging and balancing wherever it is you live. But I just want to say thank you for what you do. And I love what you do. And I love, that you have also made it easy for people like myself who I'm not doing what you're doing, but you've made it easy for us to support you, those of us that want to and can, with a financial donation. You now have your monthly donations for this past year. And my company loves being one of your donators. So if anybody is inspired and you want to help Lucy's mission and the work that you and all your team do, they can find out how to do that at dancetobefree.org. They can also take your classes. And I will bet you, Lucy, that this conversation that we're having is the beginning of the conversation arc of your work. Meaning, I don't mean sitting and doing an interview with somebody. I think what you've been doing physically for the last 5 years, I predict this next 5 years for you is going to be about being a verbal advocate as well around this topic and around sharing and around communicating, because I'm just one of many people who you touched with the knowledge you brought to my door 5 years ago and continue to through the work that you do and that I see you doing. So I celebrate you finding the ways in the years to come to put your voice out into the world and be a voice for the voiceless, so that the rest of us can learn and shift that balance so that more people have a voice than have traditionally been allowed to have.
Yeah, it's such a good point. Really, they're voiceless. It's such a tragic metaphor and reality. And I love the verbal advocate. That feels good. Yeah, there's so much we could all learn. I mean, just the simple fact of going to Mississippi. I don't know really anyone who's even been there. Just flying into that. It's like a area of the country of just like, oh, and I feel there's a lot of healing to be done there. And so, yeah, thank you
There
so
are,
much.
there are people of color in my life who have told me categorically, I'm not going to the South. Like they've just, and that kind of told me everything I needed to know, because it was multiple people of color that I know who've said that categorically, and I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Because I mean, so many people of color fled and then went north where it was better, but still filled with so many challenges. I kind of can't believe the traps that are just constantly set for failure. And it's like designed that way. And then I think of the prison system is not actually broken. This is designed to have people fail. So what's that about? And there is a lot, I'm meeting a lot of white women, but they're not in prison because of their race.
right,
It's
yeah.
trauma across the board. But yeah, yeah.
More will be revealed, and
Mhm.
I feel like I said, the next few years, I just see this rising in you. It's interesting talking to you 5 years later and
Right.
having this interview with you, because I feel like 5 years from now, there will be an extra 3 or 4 layers to your work that will continue with the same mission, but will be serving and outreaching in different ways. So thank you, Lucy, for doing what you do, and all the team that work with you, and love you very much, my friend. And I'm really glad that you were able to come on the show.
I'm so honored.
Thank you, Lucy. Take care. So dancetobefree.org is where you can find out more about Lucy and her amazing work and the team that she works with. You can support if you want to do a one-off donation or a monthly contribution. And I highly recommend getting jiggy with Lucy on one of her Zoom dance classes, because I ain't no choreography person and I had a blast. So yeah, check it all out at dancetobefree.org. Thanks so much, Lucy.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Impact the World. And if you want to go deeper and more in depth with my work, you should check out my members group, The Portal. You can find it at my website, leeharrisenergy.com, or visit theportal.world.